Today I want to share with you 5 programming mistakes that you should avoid. I learned some of these the hard way, and I hope this video will help you to save some time and energy so you don't have to make the same mistakes I made. This is kind of the video I wish I had when I started programming. In the beginning, when you are starting out as a developer, you might think that the more languages you know, the better developer you are. But this is actually not true. In my opinion, especially when starting out, you shouldn't learn multiple languages. But my advice is to learn the basic programming principles with one language so you understand the basics on how programming works and you learn how to think when building software and then actually build something. Roughly said, the programming principles are pretty much the same in all languages. And when you want to learn a new language, it is more or less just learning the syntax of that language. It's much easier to learn a new language when you are already fluent with one. Next mistake you should avoid is putting all your code in one file. When you are working with, for example, JavaScript, you don't want to put all your code in a single file. You rather want to use the files to categorize and separate your code. So if you are working with an API, for example, making get, post, delete requests, all those functions should be put in a separate file away from the rest of the code. This way you keep your code more organized and it's easier to find things from your code and understand what different parts of your code do. You can also reuse your code in multiple places much easier if you put your code in separate files. In our API example, for instance, chances are that you want to use those API functions from multiple places in your code. So using those API functions is as easy as importing them from the API file. Next mistake to avoid is not reading error messages. When non-developer people see an error message, they usually panic. What's happening? My computer is broken. What is this? It's not working. But when you as a developer see an error message, you actually should be excited. Trust me when I tell you that you don't want to be debugging an error when you don't get any error messages. I have done that enough times to tell you that it's super frustrating and sometimes it really makes me question my career choice. So believe me, error messages are gold. They usually tell surprisingly much about the problem that caused the error, and that way it's easier to start debugging and fixing the problem. So do read your error messages. Next mistake to avoid is not formatting your code. It might feel cool to write a cool one-liner or not to indent your code, for example. After all, formatting doesn't really affect the execution of the code. But majority of programming is actually reading the code rather than writing the code. So that's why it's important that your code is easily readable and well formatted. And you don't have to manually format your code. Some IDEs or code editors do this actually for you. You can also use tools like Prettier to automatically format your code based on a set of predefined rules. These rules can, for example, be that indentation should always be 2 spaces instead of, for example, 4. The real power of this comes when all your team members format their code with the tool like Prettier based on the same set of predefined rules. This way, the whole code base will always be formatted the same way and it is easier to understand and maintain. And the last mistake you should avoid is bad naming conventions. You should always use descriptive variable and function names instead of short abbreviations and names like superfunction1 or as such. As I mentioned before, majority of programming is actually reading the code. So even if a variable name x or function name temp function are fast and easy to write, and at the time of writing you know exactly what they do. But when you read your code next week, for example, you won't know what they are or what they do, not to mention if someone else from your team is reading the code. So even though it takes a little bit longer to come up with a descriptive name, please use the time to come up with the proper name. You and your teammates will thank you later. I hope these were helpful for you, and if you did like this video, please hit the like button below, and if you're not already, do subscribe to the channel also. And next, I recommend you check out this video over here, and I'll see you over there.